Thank you very much, and welcome to the Churchill Club. Tonight we will be talking about tools and platforms for content creation and all that that means today and tomorrow. In a moment we'll hear what our rock star speakers and our moderator think, especially what they are personally excited about, things that are newly possible today. I first wanted to quickly tell you about the Churchill Club at the event that this might be your first visit with us. We are a nonprofit in its 30th year. We just had our 29th birthday about a week ago. And our mission is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. I'd like to say a special hello to our founder, Rich Carlgard, who is presently publisher of Forbes, is co-founder of Churchill Club in 1985, and he, I'm pleased to announce, has recently rejoined our board. Welcome, Rich. Today we have about 7,500 members, and we every year put on up to 40 programs where we invite insightful speakers to talk about what's new, next, not widely known. We respectfully ask them not to pitch, but rather to build on insights that are out there and think about advancing collective knowledge, trying to move the needle around those things that we care about, innovation and economic growth in particular. The opportunity that this presents is that smart, motivated people like you in this room have an opportunity to access new ideas and encounter others with like interests. Over the years, this simple idea has created amazing new opportunities for people. And we certainly invite you, our newcomers, to stay with the tradition and join us. Our next program is next week on Thursday, October 30. It will be held at Park, and it is about challenges and opportunities as cities become more and more digital. And it's another amazing group of speakers, including the chair of the Smart London Board, David Gann. So I hope you'll join us. If you're tweeting tonight, please use the hashtag Churchill Club. And you will find other Twitter codes in your programs at your tables. And then finally, we are extremely grateful to our partner and our sponsor, Accenture. We couldn't have done this without you. Special thanks to Julie Rosendahl, Samantha, there you are, and Robin. Thank you so much. Really, help me thank them. It's really great to have a partner that cares about the same things that we do, and when we come together in a collaborative effort, it feels like we can really soar. So, we now have our speakers, Eric Cheng from DJI, Bjørn Rustberggaard, co-founder and COO of WeVideo, Mala Sharma, who's VP of Creative Cloud Business Adobe, and our moderator, Robin Murdoch, who's Managing Director, Internet and Social Business for Accenture. Let's give them a warm welcome and kick off our discussion.
Thank you, Karen. And thanks to the Churchill Club for organizing this event on such a fascinating topic and such a great panel. So just a few thoughts to get us started. Content creation is a space that ranges from amateurs capturing content on their smartphones, maybe some minor editing and uploading to Facebook, Instagram, etc., to professionals moving to fully digital workflows, movie creation using technologies like 4K that you might have all heard about, and increasingly cloud-based tools. And it's not just videos and photos, but we also see amazing change in apps themselves, things like Adobe Ink, where you can be creative on tablets and collaborate in new ways. And of course, then there's the monetization angle on what's the business model around this. So we've got a fantastic panel in Eric, Bjørn, and Mala. So let's get going. So in typical Churchill fashion, can you introduce yourselves? Eric.
I'm Eric Cheng, Director of Aerial Imaging at DJI. I've also been a professional photographer and a publisher for the last 12 years or so, specializing in underwater imaging, increasingly aerial imaging. And so you saw some of the stuff that I've been producing on the screens during dinner.
Hi, I'm Bjørn Rustberggaard. I'm co-founder and COO of WeVideo. I've been working in the edtech space for almost 15 years. My passion has been really to give kids a way to express themselves, really tap into their creativity, and change that equation that we're seeing today where traditionally at least 99% have been consumers and only 1% have been producers. And that's why I'm here today, to hopefully talk more about.
Hi, I'm Mala Sharma. Thanks for having me, and I'm honored to be here with all of you. I'm responsible for the Creative Cloud business and go-to-market, both across our commercial business and education. And like Bjørn, we share a common passion of really being interested in enabling any human to be creative. That's sort of my personal passion. I believe that just as individuals at the core have traits like love and fearlessness, there's also this deep desire to create. And what I'm excited about is making that possible for humankind. And obviously very interested in photography, and so it's great to have common-minded people on the panel.
Great. So I thought the way we'd do this is we'd sort of walk a bit through the content production life cycle, starting from capturing through to sort of producing and how you edit, all the way through to distribution and monetization. So let's start with kind of how you actually capture content. And Eric, looking at the footage of you being with sharks and then capturing video of volcanoes, you seem to continually push the boundaries of what's possible in the footage and photos that you capture. So what are the major technical developments that have been, recent technical developments that allow you to do what you're doing as an individual?
Well, I think the most important thing is, of course, cameras are getting better really, really quickly. And if you sort of don't pay attention for as little as 6 months, you'll realize that, the next version's out, it's a lot better. And each one of those kind of enables a different set of people to start being creative with the same tool because the costs go down. And I've always imagined that there's sort of an image quality requirement on one side and an interest in the footage on the other. If you have really, really exciting content, image quality doesn't matter so much. But if you have really boring content, image quality really matters. And that line is something that the intersection is a moving target because image quality gets so much better that people can do more and more with cameras that are cheaper and smaller over time. So I think that's the most important thing. The second thing, which I think we'll talk about later, really is sharing, and we don't need to get into that now, but the motivation to capture and create content for some people is unavoidable, but for others is really driven by sharing and getting some sort of feedback from your audience, whatever that means. Right. So those two things together, I think, are for me at least, what I'm seeing driving the increase in the amount of content that's being produced and the quality getting so much better. Right.
And Bjørn, with WeVideo, you're a platform for creativity around video. How are you seeing how people are getting that video onto your platform evolving?
So I think everybody here in the audience have a really powerful camera, a capture device. It's our smartphone. And what we're seeing is that the iPhones, the Samsungs, all these devices are actually capturing a lot better footage, always available, and with apps that makes you upload, like Adobe is doing and we're doing, and actually also editing. It's really easy for all those creators to use their footage and document, where they are, and then still have a workflow where it fits into. The other thing that I also think is interesting is we focus so much on image quality, and I'm a little bit split here because I'm also I like really high fidelity of visuals. But it's also really about, we're not consuming pixels, we're really consuming stories. And that kind of thing I think is really important because if you look at the development of new technology, how that has pushed, our ability to capture and also our ability to consume. But there hasn't been a similar development on, advancing us as storytellers, to use the technology to really tell great stories. And I think that is something that needs to follow the two other, ways.
Absolutely. And Mala, with Creative Cloud, you're enabling lots of new ways to create. Creative Cloud. Maybe you can tell us about Creative Cloud for people who don't know what Creative Cloud is and what you've done.
Sure. So maybe a little context about Adobe has been the leader in creating professional tools for creative professionals. And essentially, the package we offered was desktop software. And what we realized, there were two things happening in the marketplace. When we had the Creative Suite product, we were launching pretty much every 18 to 24 months. But what we saw around us was that the market was changing, the way consumers were consuming content was changing, and our customers were feeling the need to diversify how they were creating. So photographers wanted to get to video. Designers who were basically designing in print wanted to be able to get to mobile. And they were feeling this constraint of not being able to get there. So what Creative Cloud came to market, the problem we were trying to solve is, how do we deliver innovation to our customers so they can diversify their talents and become what we talk about a cross-media expert, so they can bring their stories to life, bring their marketing content to life, not just in one vehicle like print or another vehicle like TV, but across all channels. So that was sort of the concept and the vision for Creative Cloud. And beyond that, it was about taking that technology that Adobe had and making it possible for anybody who was a creative or wanted to have a creative bone in them to be able to express themselves. And that's what we've done with our mobile applications, where we take the technology, our 20 years of science in Photoshop, and make it really accessible to consumers who want to start creating on mobile devices.
So how's the creative process changing for people? I mean, how is Creative Cloud being used differently than traditional desktop software? Has that vision been realized?
Yeah, it starts really, the creative process, as you noted, starts from the capturing, right? And creatives, by nature, get inspired at any time. They're walking down the street, they see a beautiful color. And in the past, the way they captured their inspiration was they would take out a napkin and start sketching or making sort of, little notes and scratches. Like that was their instrument of capturing inspiration. But what we are seeing is happening with Creative Cloud is, because of mobile devices in particular, you can capture your inspiration wherever you are. You can create a brush, you can create a shape. You can bring that through Creative Cloud into our desktop tools. And because the technology and the formats are compatible, your creative process is frictionless. The other piece about creativity is creatives by nature are sort of part of a global community. They like to look at what others are doing and learn from them. We have this amazing example of a graffiti artist and somebody who was into lights, and they came up with sort of this, they got inspired and created a new way of expressing creativity, which was basically a coming together of graffiti and light. So it's about creating and getting inspiration where you are, continuing that process, being able to build on that content in the desktop tools, engaging with your community. Eric talked about getting feedback from your community, which is another key part of the creative process.
So, Eric, maybe starting with you, can we talk a bit about 4K? Because 4K is a buzzword that people probably see in Best Buy and the 4K TVs. GoPro's announced it's got the 4K GoPro 4. Well, what is 4K and what's happening around video resolution generally?
Well, 4K is a much higher resolution video format, and we're seeing a lot of the players in the display space release 4K TVs, which are pretty much standard now. One issue is that there's almost no 4K content. Some of the first 4K TVs shipped with a hard disk with 4K content because not only is it rare, but it's big, and the distribution platforms weren't really there. And we're seeing some changes to that because now everything is coming over the internet. It's much easier to get a lot of data over the internet. So we're seeing experiments in distributing 4K video. 4K, it's the same thing with cameras. When cameras get better, you see it's harder to capture good content, in my opinion, because I think, for example, some of these new cameras that have come out that are so high resolution, that photographers love them, and they have actually some of the highest return rates because people think they're defective. Because they take a picture and they look at it, they pixel peep at 100%, and it's blurry. And the reason is you didn't focus well. It focused on your eyelash instead of the eyeball or something. And so it's actually your fault, but the technology is allowing you now to see that, there's a flaw in the capture process, whatever that means. It's not related to storytelling, but it's certainly related to image quality. So I think 4K is one of these things that has to be used in the right way, and the marketing around 4K and the buzz is getting in the way of that. Really it's an opportunity to capture higher resolution source material for storytelling, and you can do with that whatever you need to do. The fact is most people are viewing this content on phones, which are very low resolution. They're increasingly high resolution, but the video content that you're being delivered is not high resolution, even if you're viewing it in a pretty high resolution format. So it's a hard thing to talk about. We're able to capture it, but I think you just think about it as better image quality for storytelling and not this target that you have to set for reproduction.
And Bjørn, you're experiencing 4K with your product. Talk to us about what you're seeing.
Yeah, so I actually have a little bit of a funny story because cameras is one thing, GoPros launching 4K, but the smartphones, they came with 4K actually before a lot of us knew it. So we have obviously apps for iOS and Android, and all of a sudden I was reading on Twitter, and basically it was customers saying, I'm editing 4K on my Samsung Galaxy 3 Note before I can do it on my powerful iMac. So what that kind of tells us is also that the smartphones are really catching up and delivering 4K, and of course we can't expect the consumers to know that this is 4K, and it's a lot of heavy work to make that playback real time and do image processing on that, and let alone if you want to try to upload to the cloud. So of course it creates new kind of challenges for us, but I think that's why companies like us and Adobe are still working on this, because it's hard problems to tackle, but it's certainly something that we can tackle.
So. Mala, you must be, in the world of 4K with Premiere Pro completely, and I understand Gone Girl is being. Maybe you can talk about.
Yeah, so Gone Girl was actually shot in 6K. It was the first feature film shot in 6K.
Movie.
Yes, it's the new Ben Affleck movie. It's a great book too if you haven't read it yet. And we basically it was completely shot with Premiere Pro, and one of the advantages of shooting in 6K is that because it's so high resolution and the amount that you're shooting is so significant that if you want to really zoom in, you don't lose any of the quality of the content.
So did you say, sorry, you said 6K?
Yeah.
So what?
Bigger, better.
So what cameras? So why are creatives shooting in higher resolution than they can ever, show at a cinema?
I think it's part of content, and the quality of the content is so that a creative can really capture and bring to life a particular visual that they're trying to capture. It's really about the depth of the experience that they want to deliver to their customers that gets them to use higher quality both hardware and software and formats. And with Adobe, it's about sort of looking at where are these formats going and being ready as the formats come to market.
So this trend of capturing content in a much higher resolution than you could ever really experience as an end user, that's a trend that's very much happening and will continue. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I mean, as hardware starts capturing higher resolution content, I mean, consumers there's always a set of consumers who want to be at the bleeding edge, and they want to be able to use that content in a way that creates really rich experiences. So yes, absolutely, there will be high resolution content, whether it's photography, whether it's video. We expect to keep seeing that.
Yeah. I heard the analogy that back in the days of black and white film, if you told a director that they could, even though they couldn't show the film in color, they could capture it in color, would they capture it in color? And I wonder if it's the same with ever higher resolution video, that it's just better to capture that content in an ever higher resolution. I wanted to turn to just actually, not the camera itself, but around the camera and how you're getting the shots you get. Eric, how did you pull off the volcano shots without destroying the equipment or yourself?
Well, some of the equipment actually did get destroyed. But it was mostly it was opportunistic. An opportunity came up to get close to the volcano, and I took it with a day's notice, and went and captured maybe the closest wide-angle footage of erupting volcano like that ever captured with a drone, and it was really the ability to position cameras in space arbitrarily without the potential danger to a pilot that allowed me to capture that footage. So, it's really the gear being ready to go. I mean, it's really just at the edge of being possible right now. And then the rest of it are all the normal factors that play into content capture, which is like opportunity, luck, skill set, those sorts of things. So everything worked out. There were a lot of moments during which I thought it might not work, but we came back with some really great footage.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, if you didn't see it up there, you should definitely go check it out. It's quite insane.
And incidentally, that was all shot in 2.7K on the GoPro. And not because there are 2.7K displays that everyone has, but because recording at 2.7K results in better 1080p distribution. So I could edit it down. You have room for cropping, as Mala was mentioning. And even though we didn't do it, it actually, for image stabilization, digitally, you want more pixels so that you can crop in a little bit to allow the frame to move around.
And then, did you shoot it in a high frame rate so you could slow it down? Was that one of the...
That's certainly one of the things we do often, but because so much of the footage was shot at night, I shot as slow as I could because I wanted the maximum amount of light capture. So I'm always sort of pushing or balancing frame rate with the amount of light that we have. Great.
Let's move on from capture, and we probably will come back to it. But let's talk about the actual sort of workflow. Bjørn, can you talk us through how WeVideo works? So how do I go from being on my smartphone, uploading content, to collaborating with others and actually ending up with a video?
Yeah. So again, the philosophy about our products and our thinking has been, creative process is of course getting feedback on the final product that you're sharing, but it's as important to get feedback, peer review during the creation process. So the faster you get feedback in that process, the better creative result you get. And actually also for a lot of things you're doing, if it's internally a product video or if it's really a creative project that you're doing, but to get feedback from multiple people, it really enhances the quality. So I would say in essence what we're doing is, we're doing what Google Docs is doing, but we're doing it for video. So multiple people can then get access to the same story. So that means if Eric started, maybe he used his smartphone or some of his DSLRs, and he captured directly on the device or uploaded. He maybe also did a rough cut on his smartphone. I can open up and I can continue in the cloud. I'm working on my web browser, but I can then start to work on multiple audio and video tracks. So I can synchronize the things. I can add captions. I can even do simple grading. But then I make the edit, and I really want to get feedback from an expert. So I pass it over to Mala. And then she can open up my edit. Still on a very different place, different location. I edit on a Chromebook. She's opening up on an iMac. But still she can see the very same edit. She can play it back. She can insert comments. She can make changes, and I can open up and see it again. And that's kind of the true essence of collaboration. It's not necessarily synchronous, but it's that ability to have peer review. And there's kind of an interesting thing, a little bit of an analogy. If we go back in time, go far back in time, like Stone Age, there are some words that were used at that time that still are among the oldest words today. And I'm sure a lot of you can guess what it is, but obviously we was one of the most important, and die. And the connection here is basically that, in the hunting and gathering society, people needed to collaborate to survive. The mortality rate was, it was astronomical. But by collaborating, getting food, and also in war, you actually manage to survive. And I think that is actually an interesting analogy back to creation processes today, because I think really it's about enabling workflows where you can collaborate, and that makes both the process better, but also the end result.
And you're working mainly with amateurs. I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, but it's so we basically wanted to take the position that I maybe traditionally have had for on Mac. So basically, those that have a deliberate passion to create a story. They're making a video for a reason, not just out of convenience, not a 6-second. But anyway, what we're seeing is that because of that workflow is so important, it's starting to actually get professionals, because they maybe are just using our tool for rough cuts. But because of that process is so much faster, then they can do the export of the EDL and end up in Adobe Premiere or any other craft editor. But it, shortening that production process in the beginning really makes a huge difference for them. And we're seeing that in a lot of industries. Media, citizen journalism is kind of one area where we all see that it's so important to break the news fast. So actually, being able to collaborate fast or do it all by yourself on your smartphone is actually more important than having a perfect quality. So we see those workflows are coming in places where we didn't think of initially.
So Mala, can you talk about Creative Cloud's been out in the market for a little while now. How have you seen the creative community change in how they are using Adobe's tools?
A couple things. One is just to build on what Bjørn was talking about, the concept that he was just describing. We refer to this as connected creativity, where the creative professional is connected to obviously their tools, which they have been using over the time while they create, but more importantly to their community. They're connected to their content, and our vision is that creative professionals need an identity, just like business professionals have on LinkedIn, and we call this the creative profile, where you, your content, your community, people you collaborate with, the assets you've created, are all defining of you and are how you get recognized and seen in the market. It's about this really frictionless flow of creation, whether you are working sort of independently as a freelancer, whether the freelancer is being hired by an enterprise to work on a project. It's about making sure the assets flow across from inspiration to the process of creation and ultimately to publishing. Right,
and Eric, you're an individual creator. What's the workflow that you use to create take the raw footage and make it viral hits like you do?
Well, I've been listening to these. I've been watching what's going on in this space and listening to this conversation with fascination, because that is all. I want all of that, but there's actually quite a lot of friction in doing what I do, and in almost all video, any kind of video production, there's a ton of friction, and it starts from that moment you hit record, because you're going to record a lot more than you need. For the volcano footage, for example, we hired an editor in LA to do that particular edit because we needed it so quickly, and it was a nightmare. I had to mail a hard disk because when you're talking about a couple gigabytes, use the cloud, it's perfect. But 200 gigabytes, okay, I could be uploading for a month on my connection, which is pretty fast. So there's a lot of friction, and I went to tremendous. It's transcoding proxies on a Mac Pro, pretty powerful computer, which took 12 hours, and then I, zipped that up and sent it over to the editor just so he'd have an extra day. We were talking about this before, 1 day head start working on these low-res proxies. We could have used the cloud approach. It would have been great if there was a way to then export it to something higher quality. For me, the issue is really bandwidth, and it's bandwidth in every step of the process, from capture to sharing. I'm always making trade-offs based on bandwidth, and the network, the connectivity speeds are just not there yet for higher-end users. I deal in terabytes very often, and when I try to back up to the cloud, I literally will leave my machine on for 30 days.
So it's fascinating, because the term cloud, obviously means everything and nothing at the same time. But in the creative world, clearly Bjørn, what you're doing is pure cloud. With Creative Cloud, can you just describe, there is a lot that's residing locally.
Yes, absolutely. So there's multiple elements to the whole offering. As I mentioned, there's the mobile applications. There's the desktops of Photoshop and the InDesign and in the illustrators that Bjørn and Eric use. That basically gets downloaded on your desktop. And to address the issue that Eric was just describing, it's leveraging the power of the desktop to be able to process content and create content locally. The sharing, however, and the collaboration all happens online. And one of the things that that Eric talked about, which is both for video and photos, when you have really high resolution photos, one of the things that we believe really tries to get at the problem, still hasn't solved the problem completely, is this concept of workers or proxies that you talked about. And it's about how does the instruction that you want to apply on the asset actually travel, but the asset doesn't. So the asset's not going back up on the cloud and down, but the instruction that you want that should follow the asset or stay with the asset is what travels across from the desktop to the cloud and maybe to your mobile device. And you can affect a change that you might start on your mobile device, but it sort of gets manifested on the desktop device. So it's really, in some senses, a hybrid workflow today, but the vision of how all of this comes together ultimately is with mobile and cloud. And a great example, if I may, is Photoshop is sort of the main flagship and the product that pretty much every creative professional uses. And the vision is, how do you make a product like that available running in the cloud? We have an experiment that we're doing with Google right now, where you can basically stream Photoshop for a Chromebook. So the idea is, how do you allow creativity to happen wherever the user is? Or we have various mobile applications that leverage that technology that Photoshop has and makes it accessible on a mobile application.
But video is the problem, the bandwidth.
Video is certainly,
we all need Google Fiber before we can remotely move to the cloud on that. Bjørn, I just want to ask you, your solution is in the cloud, so obviously you have to scale back what you can allow people to do. But you do allow things like green screen and a variety of other tools. What have you been surprised by in what people have been creating on your platform?
I think it's probably more to see in all the different areas we've seen creation, and actually also how it's been taking off. And when I came over here, or my co-founder first, but when we came over here, we didn't think that education was actually one of the areas where we should do land grab. We've been doing that. We came here for a bigger market. But seeing kind of the change in education and seeing how all of a sudden, 40 million students are starting to work in the cloud. The cloud is the way. Google Apps for Education, completely changed that paradigm. How, all these millions of kids, they're never going to use Word. They are collaborating using Google Docs. And then seeing how we actually were riding that wave, and all of a sudden we're starting to get, hundreds of thousands of students telling stories monthly. That was really a big surprise and an awakening. And also the quality of those stories, how passionate they were, that all of a sudden they could, express their knowledge that they learned in their own way and hand it in the same way as they've been writing essays before. And I would really love to show one of those stories, and it's not 4K. This is an example of 360p. It's shot on an old mobile phone, but it's all about storytelling and authentic, video creation by youth.
I'm a broken soul. I'm an open book with many torn out pages, and I walk through fire, but I thirst for truth, for what I've never tasted, and that calls to me again. The comfort of the sin.
Turn our eyes away, turn our eyes away from this path we've taken, washing clean our faces. Turn our eyes away, turn our eyes away, leaning on the hope that one day even we, oh, one day even we will be saved. I've got a war inside with a flag in hand. I wait to cry surrender, while the pride in me is fighting who I am. Why is it that I linger? I guess every man decides to take or save a life. Turn our eyes away, turn our eyes away from this path we've taken, washing clean our faces. Turn our eyes away, turn our eyes away, leaning on the hope that one day even we, oh, one day even we will be saved. We must turn our eyes away, turn our eyes away from this path we've taken, washing clean our faces. Turn our eyes away, turn our eyes away, leaning on the hope that one day even we.
So what's the story behind who created that? And that's gone viral, has it? I mean, it's...
So this story was made by some middle school students. It was an assignment from a teacher. The teacher said there are a lot of resources that you can do or use, the tools, and WeVideo is one of them that was mentioned. And then a group of 3-4 students made this video together using smartphones and our web-based app. And it actually won a film contest as well. But this is just a good example, I think, of the storytelling that makes me passionate, that makes me really want to work long hours to make a difference, because you can see that it's so authentic, this story. They're touching on, bullying problem in a lot more complex and better way than any adults. So I think there is, back to kind of the story, if you kind of give youth and everybody, ability to tell their stories, you will have great expressions like this that will change themselves and the audience.
Right. And Eric, shifting gears a bit, because I know your footage is a very different dimension. A lot of your stuff goes viral. What's the trick to making stuff go viral?
Well, I think if I really knew how to do that, I'd probably be doing something else. But I've gotten lucky a few times, and it's really having. Well, I was going to say, unique content, but we've all seen viral videos that, all you need is a cat, really. I think. So the volcano. The volcano footage, for example, we pretty much knew would go viral because the footage was so unusual It was timely because volcanoes are being discussed a lot in the media because they're erupting now. And there was a great story. We lost equipment. The camera melted. And so really the way we got the story out was by seeding it the right way. So if you have a broad enough network to get the video just placed on a site that's likely to push it viral, sites like, we used Wired and Gizmodo. Those are perhaps out of reach for some folks because and we had to approach those publications very carefully because we didn't want to hand them something that was too commercial or something that, felt like we would be feeding them content for in exchange for something. So it was really getting the media outlets excited about the story themselves and then having them write about it, and that tends to push it out. So you need the content, you need to edit it in a thoughtful way that tells a story, whatever that means. I mean, either there is a story or it's so spectacular that the footage is enough. We pushed out behind-the-scenes footage as well, which tends to get people really excited about the story itself because they want to know how it was made. And so I pretty much just edit things that I think I would like, and then try to get them out in an organic way. It can't seem too forced either. So
now, I wanted to ask you about one other bit of footage you shot recently. You did Burning Man. You did aerial footage at Burning Man, and the reason that alone is it was impressive footage. But didn't you also live stream it? And how did you pull that off from a drone?
We did live stream. We live streamed in HD from Burning Man. And it was really a test of our own equipment because we've been selling wireless HD transmission boxes for a while. But it's, we hadn't really Burning Man is perhaps the ultimate field test for gear because you have dust storms which destroy pretty much everything. And it's, it's a struggle for power, for connectivity. And so it was really sort of a guerrilla effort between a few friends and me, and we went as individuals because there's sort of no corporate. So we went really to do a test ourselves personally, and managed to rig a system that would broadcast HD something like a mile and to a home base where we could then stream out. So it actually went out over Burning Man's Ustream channel. Whenever we were flying, a picture would just pop up on the receiver, and anyone could just push it out who was in the streaming room.
So live footage from a drone with three of you being streamed over the... Yeah, amazing. Mala, a lot of what you're doing in Creative Cloud is about making it easy for creatives to get to loads of new platforms, smartphones, etc. What are the unique challenges of doing that and enabling that creative workflow, and how are you solving those problems?
In terms of publishing, one of the things that we really emphasize is helping creatives think about mobile first. As we've been talking about, pretty much everybody is consuming content on mobile, and how do we use our desktop applications or deliver services that help customers build basically build once, but are able to deploy in multiple platforms or multiple form factors. It's about allowing them to test before they actually deploy in a very using a service or part of the product. So it's both emphasizing what the end result is for the customers. They understand how they should build the product, but more importantly, providing services that they can test before they actually deploy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Bjørn, your platform allows people to reach YouTube and others. How does that work, and what are some of the unique things that people are wanting to be able to do when they distribute their content?
Yeah, so I think it's simplicity, and if you create, that you're able to publish anywhere. So we've been plugging in, most of the video sites, the social media sites that are available. And if you want to publish to 15 places at the same time, you can do that. It's nothing stopping you. In part of the markets that we're working on, we have an opposite problem because privacy is a big thing. So when you're in the cloud, you still want to have kind of a walled garden, so you're handling privacy issues within that tenant, within that walled garden, particularly in education. So we have to balance kind of that and give actually our enterprise customers the ability to configure which destination, how open actually the walled garden should be. Because for instance, in education, you want some kids to be able to experiment with social media, but others are too young to actually know what they're doing. So you want to restrict it.
And so let's, final 10 minutes, let's talk about making money, but both in terms of the services that you will offer and Eric, you from a creative perspective. Eric, when you're loading up, I know you've got a unique situation with DJI, but where's the value you as a creative can get from the likes of YouTube, and how's that been evolving?
I think actually very few people have figured out how to get monetary compensation from releasing videos socially. Usually the value is not in the media itself, but what the media being out there brings to you. So it's sort of strange because we get approached all the time by people saying, will you let us use your content? You'll get a lot of exposure for it. And that's sort of the thing that content creators hate hearing the most, because that means $0, And but what I'm seeing more and more are a new generation of content creators who are against watermarks. They're really for releasing their content sort of without any restriction, in the hopes that it will bring, elevate them in some way so that they become valuable. So, they're teaching, there's a lot of education going on, a ton of education, workshops. They might release a ton of free footage in order to get people to sign up for a workshop that's streamed out over Google Hangouts or over some other platform, which are coming up, which take, the standard 30% or whatever. So there's a whole new marketplace that's much more complicated than the traditional kind of stock image sales model, which is still out there and which I use sort of opportunistically. If you have images just sitting around, they're not doing anything, I figured you might as well put them up. I mean, I don't use the dollar sites. I'm not really a big fan of those, but they are perfectly suitable for some people who shoot that kind of content and want to play the numbers games. So I think it's sort of futile to try to protect the content, unfortunately. I mean, my most popular image, we were talking earlier, I did a Google reverse image search, and it's on 500,000 websites. And it's sort of, yeah, so it's sort of, it's you can't go after them, and even if you could, would you want to? Most of them are personal sites where people are just showing your work because they like it. I mean, I would love it if they would, point to me as the creator, and in some cases pay me for it if it's a company using it.
What is this most popular image?
It's a screaming. It's called the screaming turtle. It's a juvenile loggerhead turtle with its, flippers over its head. Some of you might have seen it. Yeah, it's a common avatar image for people. They use it as their profile image.
Mullet, with Creative Cloud, you really flipped the business model completely for Adobe. How has that worked out? I mean, you went from siloed software to subscription. What's been
It's been phenomenal from multiple points of view, actually. One is from setting the business model aside for a second, our ability to really deliver innovation and change and shift our relationship with our customers from sort of this transactional, once in 2 or 4 or 6 years, to a relationship that's constant, where they are building their businesses and sort of, whether it's a website, whether it's other content that they're pushing out based on our technology. It's a relationship that's service-based, and so that's been a phenomenal sort of shift in how our relationship with our customers has changed. Outside of that, from a business model standpoint, moving the business to a recurring revenue stream has been great for not just Adobe, but also in, again, the way we are able to make our product more accessible to our customers. In the past, when you were buying desktop software, you might have been paying $2,500 for a Creative Suite offering. But because it's a subscription, you can pay for it when you need to use it. it makes the product more accessible, makes the technology more accessible.
And
so
one of the tiers gives you access to everything.
It gives you access to everything, and what it's done for us, again, any business model sort of is driven by two things. One is your customers keep paying you, but more importantly, you get new customers into the franchise. And one of the big things that shifted for Adobe in the Creative Cloud was that our product that a lot of people aspire to use and want to create amazing content was not accessible to them because of the price point. And that was a big shift that we were able to make. And it's also allowed us to reach consumers as a result of the change in the business model.
Eric, I know you're a customer of Creative Cloud. So what's your perspective on the change?
I'm actually a big fan of it. I was nervous when they announced it, not necessarily because I actually would buy the entire suite, which was very expensive, and it was very painful every time to upgrade. And now you just, if you want to, I don't want to think of it as pain, but it's pain spread out over time now. But you get a lot from it because the resources that are offered with the full Creative Cloud subscription are sort of, I discover more constantly because I'm only using a very small percentage of it, and I know it's all there for me. And the issues that I had in the beginning were solved. I used to spend up to 6 months a year on boats. And I was worried. I'm always worried about these cloud solutions because some of them require that you check in. And I've had situations where I've been on a boat and launched the software, and it says, please check in. I had to get an internet connection, and so I would actually travel with ways to crack the software, even though I legally owned it, because I needed to be able to use it on the road. So those problems mostly are gone, and unless, of course, the solution is 100% in the cloud, in which case.
And Bjørn, you have a very different model. You've got a freemium model. How's that playing out? Are people going free? Are they upgrading? What's the model?
So I think we're following the path of most freemium companies, and there's obviously a very large percentage that are using the free version, and to really make them convert, you can't kind of start taxing them immediately. You have to really engage with them. They have to be delighted. And what we've been working on is giving them a creative ladder. So as they are kind of expanding their creativity and using the tools in more complex ways, we open up more features, and then also they are more inclined of buying a subscription or going to the next level. So that's kind of one important thing that we're seeing. The other thing, like Mala mentioned, it's really an innovation platform when you have a cloud solution, because you're having tens of thousands of users coming in every day. And if you start listening to them and you start bringing out new features, all of a sudden you start attracting a new segment. So for us, the discovery of all the different markets that we have, when you have kind of the gates open and there's a really low hurdle for them to get started, and you're not asking for much, it's all free. You can tell your stories without much restrictions, and then as they start advancing, you can provide them new opportunities. But that is just a great framework of learning and growing.
So final question before we go to Q&A. Just be interested in all of your perspectives on how storytelling is going to change. How are we going to be, with all of these tools, with all this ability to capture, maybe at the consumer level, but also all the way to professional, what's the next 5 years going to be like? Are we going to see even more change? Mala, maybe start with you.
I think the biggest change we'll see is how all of us participate in storytelling. And Bjørn talked about this, which is it's not just the domain of professionals who want to tell stories and build great experiences. It's about how do we enable individuals and give them tools who want to deliberately create, and we call them deliberate creators, is to bring their stories to life. And the example that Bjørn just shared with us on the video was extremely compelling, where young students who have an idea want to put it out there, and companies bring technology and services that enable that in a distributed way. If the students are in one classroom or across the globe, there's multiple projects that Adobe works on. It's called Adobe Youth Voices, where children from across the world are encouraged to use, whether it's our existing tools or new tools, to really bring their passion and their stories to life, because that's sort of the mass market and the mass communication, how these tools can really bring their ideas to life.
Eric, your thoughts on where we're heading?
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody will have access to very powerful tools from capture to share. So they're really, the only barrier really is the individual themselves. And a lot of people want to tell stories and don't for some reason. So I think there's, maybe the next phase will be a way to motivate people to create more. And then also perhaps a way to filter all the content coming through, because now, there are too many stories already to consume. Just amongst my network, I see way too much every day, and I sort of have to choose based on whatever algorithm Facebook has fed me, what things to look at. And so I think it's going to be, we already have sort of onslaught of imagery every day, and hopefully, the imagery will start to get organized into stories, so that we can enjoy it a lot more. There's a message, actually.
Yeah, I certainly think that the tools will be smarter. For instance, if you're making a personal narrative, voice is really important, and making sure, giving feedback that, things like, voice is not coming through, that's things that tools can do. So I think we will see a lot more automation on that area. But I think to really change this, somebody, and that's something I'm really passionate about, have to give youth or everybody the same, free education of storytelling. So in similar way that Khan Academy, completely changed or gave new opportunities for everybody to learn, math and science, I think there will be an opportunity for somebody to do similar with storytelling and film. And I think that's kind of when the capture side and really the consumption side will actually be able to lift and provide better quality stories that actually are more enjoyable consuming, because it's actually compelling storytelling. I also think that smarter communities will come, and Adobe is doing a great job there. That actually is increasing the feedback. So the feedback so we're learning from each other. That's also a beautiful way of learning. You don't need to take a course. So I think also that will improve the quality of the stories over time.
Great. Well, let's have questions. Stick your hand up if you've got a...
Hi, my name is Aaron Wilson with Citrix Systems. Thank you all for being here tonight. So my question's directed to Mala specifically. I'm interested if you could share the adoption rate for moving or migrating customers from your siloed, product sales to the Creative Cloud. And if you can tell us or give us an idea about how long that process has taken and where that kind of quantum shift really started to happen in that migration process. Thank you.
Sure. It all started out actually with an experiment in Australia, and where we wanted to really understand what would be the rate of adoption amongst our traditional customers. And that's where we found not only were we getting creative professionals, but consumers into the franchise. And that's sort of what emboldened us into making a really big bet and declaring that as we are committed to changing the entire creative platform to this connected creative platform, that we had to really bet on one way of building product. And it was about saying that we want to innovate and iterate on the product as quickly as we can. And in terms of adoption, it's been 3 years. The journey has been about 3 years long. We're not done yet, but the rate of adoption has been phenomenal, as I alluded to earlier, both with creative professionals and consumers coming to the franchise because they want to create and tell stories, and they want to benefit from the technology that we have to offer, which is now more accessible. What's surprising is that we have 3 customer sets. There's enterprises who buy from us. There's consumers. There's small and medium businesses. We've seen pretty much across the board adoption across all 3, but enterprises in particular have been sort of ahead of the curve, as well as individual creative professionals. And so it's been, overall, we've pretty much, I think, exceeded targets. I can't say anything more than that, but overall, we have over 3 million paying subscribers and a very large number of customers who are sort of in trial and experimenting with the platform.
Great. Next question, please.
Hi. So I have one question, but I think I have to ask it kind of separately based on creative or platform. So Eric, as a creative, over the course of your career, learning new platforms and new features, really difficult. There's a huge learning curve. What are some of the aspects that have really motivated you to take that effort to, say, either switch platforms or add a new tool and just use some new software? And then kind of from the platform side, probably even more difficult part of it is how have you kind of looked at the creatives and seen what their pain points are to figure out what new features or what new things, whether it be user experience or an actual, effect or feature, how have you been able to kind of figure out what is the best thing to prioritize to build next?
Should I start? I guess I've always looked for tool sets rather than software that guides me through a particular process. I don't like wizards. And I think we're seeing some people trying to automate video editing, for example, by giving you slots to put stuff in, medium shot of a person. And that's perhaps great for some ideas, but no one's going to use that for real creative production. So this is one of the reasons I love the Adobe suite, because I just feel like the tools are there and you can accomplish the same task 10 different ways or 100 different ways or more. And people do. They do all sorts of novel things, and the infrastructure is in place to share workflow, and increasingly so perhaps with communities being pulled into these tools. So I've always gravitated to those. Having said that, my primary motivation for switching is usually rage. I use a product for a long time and it works in the beginning, and then either something changes or the world changes and the company doesn't adapt. I'm not going to name any names, unfortunately, right now, but I've written about it extensively. But usually it drives me to write about it, to explain why I've made a shift from one platform to the other. And it's usually because those companies have lost touch with how people are actually using their products, or perhaps they've switched their target markets away from professionals or high-end users to consumers. And it's very hard to design something that works for both. I think tool sets tend to work for both, especially if you give people training wheels in more advanced software, or you allow, you have a layer right underneath the simple stuff that is still really powerful. But fundamentally, I want the software to get out of the way so that I don't have to think about it anymore. And there are a lot of ways to do that.
From a platform perspective, Adobe, we've always been very customer-centric, but in the old days of desktop software, we would go out there when, say, a CS3 was released, and then 6 months into that cycle, when it was time to release Creative Suite 4, we would try and get customer feedback, and that worked for that model. But what's changed for us is because we can innovate when the engineers are ready to sort of release new capabilities. That same culture that we had, spending time with our customers, allows us to iterate really quickly. And you talked about the Gone Girl a while ago. One of the ways we sort of made that opportunity real was our engineers were sitting with David Fincher's editing team, and in fact, there are several features that were requested while they were in the editing process, and we were iterating, and we could because we had this very agile development platform to release features. Where internally we talk about them as Fincher features, because what the cloud allows you to do and the platform allows you to do is innovate quickly and release quickly. And the other dimension is we believe that Adobe alone cannot come up with all the best and the greatest ideas. Customers and the ecosystem can participate in that. So we just recently took Adobe's 25 years of science and basically packaged it into an SDK and said, all right, Creative Cloud is the platform for creativity. This is available to you as developers. You build on our platform. And now we have multiple startups and larger companies using that, leveraging that SDK to innovate and deliver solutions for their customers. So it's about the vision and the capability we were trying to really bring to life is understanding customers' needs ourselves, but knowing that not all those customers are ours, and our ecosystem partners can also build solutions and innovate on the platform.
Bjørn?
Yeah, I agree with all Mala is saying on the customer getting feedback from the users. We started natively in the cloud, so for us it was very easy to get the feedback because they were connected. And from day one, we almost got like every month 10,000 suggestions, love and hate. So, and it's been growing, so it's a lot more. So the challenge is not kind of getting the feedback. The challenge is really prioritizing what is the different types of user groups, what do they need, and then you have to have in-depth conversations with them. And it's first when we really managed to understand who our core users are and started to work with them, if it was journalists or if it was real estate agents or if it was teachers or if it was the more deliberate creative that Mala has talked about, a freelancer or an individual. But when we started to know more about them, that's when we could prioritize and really do what was needed. But I think a company like us, we're a small team, so for us we have to prioritize the things that are being most meaningful for the most. So it's really finding the things that are amplifying our mission across all verticals.
Great. Next question, please.
Hi. Thank you for the insightful presentation. My question is regarding the amount of content that we deal with on a daily basis now, and the quality, and of course the storytelling is a very important part of this, and the technology. But in respect to search and being able to deliver the right content at the right time to the right audience, who do you think is going to be leading that? Or is it going to be just left to search engines and some of the vendors such as Facebook to display the content to you? Or do you think there is going to be some technology leaders who are going to take that role to deliver the right content to the right audience at the right time? Thank you.
I can add something there. So you talked about the creative process, and at Adobe we call it the 4 M's. It's the make, which is the creation part of it, the move, which is the distribution part of it. And you talked about monetization, but in between the move and monetization is the measure. And so it's about measuring the content and really ensuring that you can personalize that content and personalize this to the customer or the kind of consumer who's consuming that content. And that's a big part of what we do at Adobe from a digital marketing perspective. And that's really the whole vision of the content creation process. It's about not just putting the content out there, but making sure it gets delivered, as you rightly noted, at the right time to the right audience. And this is about using big data. It's about understanding consumer profiles. It's about delivering experiences. And that's where, Eric, the monetization piece becomes real, is about understanding both the consumer and the content and sort of marrying them at the right time at the right place.
Yeah, I see from the automation space, those companies that are really analyzing videos actually as you record them. The technology, the progress of the technology there is just mind-boggling. So, using artificial intelligence of processing video, that's going to completely change how we can search for videos in the future, because they will know exactly who are in the videos, what kind of actions are happening there, what kind of interactions, and I think that kind of semantic analysis of videos will be made available by the most powerful kind of search engines. We see that already now. That's a trend that will come.
Yeah, I have something to say on the creation side. If I want to target a particular market, or I want people to see my imagery, unfortunately, right now I have to taint the product to get it to the most people, because the people are, I don't know what it is, actually. The distribution mechanism has evolved to push the worst content to the most people. And so even if I have something that I really like, it ends up with some terrible headline that has the word stunning and maybe 3 sentences in it. And that's the stuff that has a higher likelihood of being distributed to more people. So it's sort of a broken system. And I would love these companies to tackle it and tailor content for you based on your network. I mean, I wish I had that every day. And I wish I had the way to explicitly rate stuff, in a big karma system, but those tools aren't there. They sort of just watch what you do and try to predict.
And one of the things there, I think, that also addresses is the involvement of the community, right? And I've been thinking about, Eric, your comment about how this wonderful photo you took of the turtle, and there's so many impressions of that, but you weren't able to monetize it. And that's in particular an area that we've been trying to address, and we recently launched a service called Talent Search. And what that's about on Behance is where creatives can, they have their public portfolios out there, but the community ranks them, and based on their content, it's anybody can go rank the content, but also some folks who are sort of identified as leaders in the community rank content, and that gives them a creative rank based on, and because it's all public, and marketers and business owners are sort of looking for great creative talent. We've created a platform where we're sort of bringing the creative talent to the marketing to the marketing persona, so they can making it easier for creatives to monetize what they're creating.
Next question.
Hi. Oh, that was very loud. Sorry. My question's directed at Eric. I would love to own a DJI drone. Unfortunately, they're very expensive, and like any good emerging technology, we see that it starts very expensive and then reaches a mainstream consumer. What do you see as far as the future of drone pricing decreasing so that everyone in the room could have one?
Oh, yeah, well. Yeah. She wants one. I mean, I think we're in the middle. We're right in the middle of that, or perhaps at the very beginning of that right now. The multicopters or drones are dropping in price, virtually monthly. It's incredible, and it's because you see a lot of pressure in the industry from all sides. You have toy manufacturers pushing up from below. High-end stuff is just dropping out of the equation unless it's for really specialized application, and there's sort of every space in the industry is being filled by an existing or a new player. So there's so much competition that it will drive prices down really quickly. And in fact, we've already seen it. I mean, when I started doing this stuff, so it was thousands of dollars for a kit, and you had to read a wiki to assemble it, and maybe flash some firmware, and that's out of reach for most people, not for monetary reasons. And it was still thousands of dollars. And in the last couple of years, we've seen it drop to $2,000 for a full setup, to $1,000, to kind of $500 now for something that can fly virtually autonomously with a built-in camera and smartphone integration. So I would say in the last 18 months, we've gone from, you have to solder in stuff, $2,000 to $500 fully integrated. And so that's a pretty steep curve going down. And, so I think probably your desires will be met, sometime in the near future.
Great. Next question.
First of all, thanks for a very, very insightful talk. But we sort of, you touched upon it briefly, but there's a lot of talk about storytelling and editing. But it seems to me that the market is moving more and more towards live streaming and just sort of raw footage. How do you guys view that, especially like WeVideo and DJI?
Yeah, well, I can talk about it from DJI's perspective. Drones are, I think, behind the curve in terms of how quickly you can share content. And so I think, we would love for the products to become really well integrated, to the same degree that your phone is. You should be able to shoot and share. And in some ways, it's a little more challenging because people tend to be out in the open shooting somewhere, and you may not have good connectivity. There's some other problems. But I mean, from a consumer perspective, the raw footage is not very interesting. I mean, some of it may get a lot of views, but I don't think people are getting much out of most of the raw footage out there. And so, we've actually created communities where the first rule is don't post your backyard flight tests, because there are so many that everyone gets so excited and they want to share, but actually nobody wants to see that stuff unless you're in the market for one. So you need to target, those particular videos to people who are doing research because they want to see the capabilities. So I think it's a really complex issue because you want people to share as much as they can, but you want to filter out. The people who want to consume good content need to be able to find it. This is related to the last question. And so I don't know what the answer is yet, but we're in the middle of it now.
So I think it serves two different purposes. Live streaming is a lot about engagement. We see that in sports. If there's a football match, being able to trim a highlight, and maybe stitch them also and post it quickly on Twitter, that's a way that clubs can engage with their audience. When we did a campaign with Adidas and Justin Bieber, we had, of course, it was professional music, it was Bieber music, or professional content and Bieber music, but we had 2,000 user-generated stories every hour. But that's not really storytelling. That's crowd-based engagement, so you're really engaging with the brand, and basically the audience is being the carrier, sharing it through the social media. So I think the interesting thing is when you're starting storing those highlights from those live streams and combining it with video on demand, like footage that you already have, and then make curated stories. That's kind of where the storytelling comes in.
I think we've got time for about 3 more questions. So next question.
Great, thanks. David Needle, Tab Times. There's a company in the Valley here called Vilinx that does preview technology where they divide the screen into 4 quadrants so you can sort of see at a glance what's inside the video. Do you see anything else like this from anyone else, or any wish list for ways we can figure out what's in the video ahead of time without having to watch the whole thing?
You want to go?
Oh man, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I haven't really seen much into when you listen to a podcast, there are all these options now to try to scrub through the content more quickly. And most of the tools I use, the tools in the content creation side allow you to scrub through video to get a really quick preview. And and I'm guilty. I'm always scrubbing, even when I'm watching stuff on YouTube and it gets a little boring. I might skip ahead. But I haven't seen. I think we need tools to understand what's in the video. So there's a metadata stream associated with it, and I haven't seen that much going on. Yeah. Do you know?
Yeah. So I've certainly seen components that can analyze the content. So, for instance, if you're doing a user-generated content contest, you can basically filter on content that should not be public. Things like that, it's already out there. But I haven't seen a technology that you explained.
Yeah, I think in terms of visualization of audio is something that we're actually experimenting at this time, because one of the things that videographers, what we hear from our customers is they're looking for specific pieces of audio content in a piece of video. And what they need to do is, if it's 3 hours of content or they have raw footage and they want to find that one particular word or sentence, it's a really hard and time-consuming task to get there. And one of the things that we're experimenting with is, how do you visualize audio based on the intonation, what is the total harmonic distortion of the content, so we can identify, oh, that sounds like that might be noise, or this sounds like a certain pitch in the audio that allows you to zoom in at particular spots using visual aids. And this is an experiment we're doing at this moment, is to help. That's on the creator side. This is on the creator side, that's correct, yeah.
Great, next question.
Good evening, and thanks for your presentation. My question is this: to what extent do you see the creative content at the low end being squeezed out actually, by advances in technology. And let me come at it this way. When we move from 1K to 4K, when we go from 8-bit color depth to 10-bit color depth, and from 30 frames to 60 frames, those three represent a 16x increase in the number of bits transmitted for one frame. Excluding future advances, then, and with the issue of net neutrality hanging over our heads, you can see that you're going to soon be on a FedEx model where the faster you want it, the more you'll pay. And so the creative person is going to be squeezed out because he won't be able to afford this new technology. What do you see beside data compression, video compression, saving us from this problem?
Eric, do you want to?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we keep talking about storytelling here, and that's sort of a fluffy word, unfortunately. But like my most popular image doesn't have a lot of data in it. It was shot with a 6-megapixel camera and then cropped vertical. It's actually a 2-megapixel image, and it's shared everywhere. It was up in the Smithsonian for 18 months. And if the content is interesting enough, I don't think we need. You don't need all those bits to tell the story. It would be great to have them because it can enhance the experience. I mean, regarding net neutrality, I think that's another discussion. Hopefully, we'll have it.
Part of that, Bjørn, your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of, as I said before, I still think content is, a lot more important than actually the fidelity. I must say, though, that, resolution for me is less interesting than actually higher frame rate. I think higher frame rate made us being able to see things by slowing it, by shooting at a faster speed and then playing it back slower. That made some things really come to light. So, but in general, I think it actually maybe will come a little bit of clashback that we like with 3D. That was a big hype. I'm not seeing anybody going around with 3D cameras anymore. Okay, we watch the blockbusters, but is there any consumers here that are using 3D cameras? So I think to a certain level, we're starting to get to a point where actually the human eye is not actually being able to see that much different. Like I think 4K is pretty far already. Net neutrality, I can't comment on. I think Mala can talk a lot more about that.
I agree with you about the more the data, the richer the content, the harder it is for it to sort of for a consumer to if they want to transport that content, the cost of that becomes really high. What we're really experimenting with is to stop thinking about the content in its entirety, as in the entire file or the entire photograph, but really think about it in terms of the components. So almost disaggregating the concept of a file and thinking about the assets and the instructions that travel with the assets that I talked about earlier. And you can imagine, if there's two creatives collaborating on the same project across, a distributed geography, and they both are working on the same brand campaign that might have video, that might have web, it might have applications that are mobile applications. Not all of that content needs to travel across the cloud, but the key assets, whether it's colors, whether it's brand components, whether it's strokes or shapes, those components can travel across the cloud so that co-development can happen. So it's about sort of disaggregating and getting away from the thinking of compressing content to what are the key pieces in that content that need to be available for a distributed creation.
Last question. Sorry.
Okay, I just want to comment one more thing. So one thing is the final product, and I think that's going to be the balance, like you mentioned, between it's taking up a lot of storage, and then also who's getting access to publish those high quality footage. But when it comes to collaboration, I don't see a problem. Like we're doing proxy today, so that means, and we can tune those proxies based on the bandwidth that you want to use on that. We wouldn't be able to have 5,000 districts around in the U.S. being, using WeVideo if proxies was not working. If they were shooting on 1080p and we're transferring 1080p around, all the bandwidth will completely be blocked. So proxies we know work.
So my question's about change. You've all benefited from long-term trends that have occurred. So Eric, your stunning photographs from drones are only possible because cameras have gotten small enough for them to be flown around on these unmanned items. Bjørn, your business is really only possible because consumer internet has gotten fast enough for it to be practical. Your business has only become possible because servers have become powerful enough to do that kind of work. What are the big changes that you can see, or what's the number one change that each of you can see happening based on a long-term trend happening in the next 5 years that we should all be interested in?
Eric?
Let's see. That's a good question. I think what I'm most interested in is the ubiquity of image capture. It's just normal now. They're in all of our devices, but there's a next step, which is sort of constant capture. I think we're already seeing people are. We're talking about live streaming. The question came from there, and the way that a lot of people shoot with some of the new cameras, especially cameras like GoPros, is essentially to turn them on. I saw a film lately. What was it? Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson. That was a very different style of shooting. They used hidden cameras, like 6 to 9 angles, just running, and the actors didn't even know the cameras were there. It freed them up to use non-actors, because there weren't cameras in their faces. Of course, that presented a huge workflow nightmare because you end up with so much data that you have to sift through, which has also been a running theme. So I'm really interested in what happens when we free cameras from being positioned in 2D. That's what we do as a company, is essentially unlock that third dimension. I think it will be normal to see low altitude shots, sort of arbitrary altitude imagery. It's still, right now I've gotten a lot of stuff published, and it's gone viral because people aren't used to seeing it yet. But they will be used to seeing it, and it will be normal. And that's not just, normal traditional pictures, but sensor data from arbitrary locations will be really big too. So it's sort of just, more imagery, from different perspectives, and what we can do with that, what that means for monitoring and survey and, across pretty much all industries that currently use imagery.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of seeing on content creation, I'm seeing kind of the automated world where computers are basically downloading your footage, telling your stories. That trend will just accelerate, but that's template-based. And then we see kind of a growing community of, again, people that have time to tell stories, and they're doing it. But I think we will start seeing a third group of people, and that's actually people that are outsourcing the creation process, or they do part of it. So I think there will start being professional services where you can hire somebody to do it, and where it's not all this cumbersome process that Eric talked about, shipping the hard drive, where actually somebody can pick it up immediately and deliver something, and then actually it starts to become also an opportunity for marketplace and monetization. So I'm like the crowdsourcing of both capture and editing. That's something I strongly believe in.
3 things come to mind. One is creation on mobile, and this is not just consumers creating on mobile devices, but creative professionals creating on mobile devices, where mobile devices become part of the creative platform. Another big theme is about touch and touch interfaces, and how that gets, creatives by nature are tactile, and they like to use their hands to create. And the piece that I get excited about is devices like the Microsoft Surface Pro, and how we're leveraging, Photoshop and Illustrator on a platform like that to give complete control at a pixel level on touch. And the third one, I think, is really about how that content gets used or delivered in a micro-targeting way, and this is where beacons come into place. It's about how content that's created and can be served up in an extremely relevant way at a micro level based on your physical presence. So looking at sort of these three, looking into the future for creativity, looking at the future for how all of this will get done, an underlying principle below that is we believe this will all happen in the open. It'll happen collaboratively. It'll happen like Behance, for example, at any point in time has hundreds and thousands of creatives looking for feedback from other customers, from other creatives, excuse me. So it's about an open collaboration, a platform that allows you to create where you want to create, when you want to create, and sort of use tactile and touch and technology to be able to create on new surfaces.
Eric, Bjørn, Mala, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us so freely tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Robin, thank you for guiding the conversation so masterfully. We appreciate that as well. As a small token of our appreciation, we have for you the Churchill Club speaker T-shirt. Robin, we're going to keep you in those T-shirts. Please wear them in good health. Video of this program will be available hopefully tomorrow for viewing on the Churchill Club YouTube channel, which is a place where you will find most, if not all, of our programs over time. And you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. See you next time. Good night.